Welcome back, listeners and educators, to the Transformative Pedagogy Podcast, where we'll be cultivating equity in education. I'm your host, Laura Paz-Huerta. So this is the fourth episode of the podcast series where we dive into the complex intersections of education, justice, and equity, and try to explore some solutions to create a classroom environment that is more equitable and inclusive. Because once again, change not only starts at the top, but it also happens in the classroom. Today, we'll be talking about a topic that not only is a crucial and often overlooked issue in our education system. Today, we are discussing how to best support our LGBTQ plus students in the K through 12 classroom. Students in the K through 12 system who identify as LGBTQ plus face unique challenges in schools. All these challenges can impact not only their academic success, but their well-being and mental health. Today, we're going to unpack these challenges and, most importantly, explore some of the strategies that we as educators, community leaders, and members can adopt in order to foster a safe space for our students that are ultimately inclusive and supportive as well. So sit down, relax, or if you're driving somewhere, I hope that this truly helps you to become the best educator you can be. So, what are some of the challenges our students face? Let's start off with some data first. According to the 2021 National School Climate Survey by the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, nearly 82% of LGBTQ plus students reported hearing homophobic remarks regularly at school, and over 70% experienced verbal harassment due to their sexual orientation or gender identity. It is important to comprehend as educators that this can happen right under our noses, and these experiences are way too common for these kids. In addition to that, students who identify as transgender and non-binary students face even more discrimination. Data from the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network shows that 50% of students identifying as transgendered have been prevented from using their preferred name or pronouns at school. Furthermore, nearly 1/3 of transgender students are denied access to bathrooms and locker rooms that align with their gender identity. Again, I can't say this enough. The experiences these students have in the K through 12 system can and will have serious consequences on these students. There's a study that was conducted by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention that states that LGBTQ plus students are more likely than their heterosexual cisgender peers to experience mental health challenges. The Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance Report found that 60% of LGBTQ plus students felt persistently sad or hopeless, and more than 35% seriously considered suicide in the past year. compared to just 15% of their non-LGBTQ plus peers. So it goes without saying that marginalizing our LGBTQ plus students, it's not just an issue of discomfort, but it's truly one of safety, mental health, and, to be honest, in some cases, it's survival for these kids. So how can we address these challenges? This is a heavy one, right? We understand the severity of the challenges faced by LGBTQ plus students. What can schools, what can educators and community members do to address these challenges? The good news is that schools have the power to create significant change through inclusive policies and practices. Another great step in the right direction would be the implementation of anti-discrimination policies that explicitly protect LGBTQ plus students. Schools that adopt these policies are essentially prohibiting harassment based on sexual orientation or gender identity and report lower rates of bullying and victimization. In fact, research shows that LGBTQ plus students in schools with comprehensive anti-bullying policies were 50% less likely to experience verbal harassment. And another key strategy is providing professional development for educators. So many teachers and staff members, myself included when I was first starting out, wanted to support LGBTQ plus students. But sometimes we don't know how to do so effectively or in the correct manner. And offering any sort of training on LGBTQ plus issues like understanding gender identity, using affirmative language, and addressing bullying empowers educators to create a more inclusive classroom environment. Which, come on, folks, that's the goal here. One example of how effective this can be comes from the California Safe Schools Coalition, which implemented LGBTQ plus awareness programs in several districts. So after introducing these programs, schools reported a 28% decrease in homophobic remarks and a 34% drop in LGBTQ plus related bullying. Additionally, it's important for schools to establish gender and sexuality alliances, or GSAs, which provide LGBTQ plus students with safe spaces where they can find community, support, and resources. And it's backed up by research. There's research that shows that students who participate in GSAs are less likely to feel isolated and more likely to report positive relationships with peers and adults at school. According to the Journal of Research on Adolescence, students in schools with GSAs are 23% less likely to skip school due to feeling unsafe, and 36% more likely to report feeling a sense of belonging, which is truly something nice to see. You're affirming that these kids are safe, are in a safe environment with you, and they feel like they can come to you and feel safe in your classroom. Additionally, what can we do? What can our schools do? Apart from policy changes, right? Schools can make a concrete effort to create affirming spaces where LGBTQ plus students feel supported and valued for who they are. This starts with something as simple as visibility. I know a lot of teachers in classrooms at my school site, have a sign by their desks, by their windows, by their doors that say, all are welcome or you are safe here, right? And it's just a little beacon of light that shows these students that they have a space there, right? So visibly supporting LGBTQ plus students by including LGBTQ plus topics in the curriculum, right? Or showing some sort of visibility so that they can see themselves reflected in what they learn. It doesn't have to be in your face. No, but it can be as simple as adding someone from the community into a poster on the wall, right, related to the subject, and just small little things. So adopting an inclusive curriculum highlighting contributions and histories of LGBTQ plus individuals, which helps normalize diverse identities. So when LGBTQ plus students see their experiences validated in the classroom, it's fostering a greater sense of belonging. Study conducted by GLAD found that LGBTQ plus students who were exposed to positive representations of the LGBTQ plus community in their curriculum were 22% more likely to report feeling supported at school. So it works. It impacts them. It makes them feel welcome. It makes them feel seen. Furthermore, the use of inclusive language in classrooms is essential. This includes asking for students' preferred names and pronouns, avoiding gendered language in everyday interactions, and addressing students with gender-neutral terms such as everyone or students rather than boys and girls. It's seen that when schools adopt these practices, it creates an environment where all students, regardless of their gender, identity, or sexual orientation, feels respected. And another crucial aspect of creating these affirming spaces is addressing the unique needs of transgender and non-binary students. That's also including and ensuring access to gender-affirming facilities like bathrooms and lockers, and updating school records to reflect students' chosen names and pronouns. The National Center for Transgender Equality reports that students who are allowed to use facilities matching their gender identity have significantly lower rates of depression and anxiety. So, I know I've given you a lot of data, a lot of information, but what does this truly look like when it's implemented, right? I want to share some success stories with you, some real world examples of schools leading the way in creating these inclusive environments for LGBTQ plus students. A standout example would be the Chicago Public Schools, which has implemented a lot of robust policies to support, their LGBTQ plus students. The Chicago Public Schools was one of the first districts in the country to adopt an inclusive curriculum. And they've also made significant strides in providing gender-neutral bathrooms in every school. Another great example is the Los Angeles Unified School District, which provides extensive professional development on LGBTQ plus issues for educators and staff. LAUSD also has a dedicated LGBTQ plus coordinator who helps ensure that policies are being implemented and that students have access to LGBTQ plus affirming resources. So these districts have seen tangible improvements in student well-being, including increased attendance rates, lower disciplinary referrals, and a higher sense of belonging amongst LGBTQ plus students. So I know this is a lot of great information that we are taking in, but I also thought about how important it is for someone from the community to share their real life experiences, especially as a student. So joining us today is Theo, who is an amazing and passionate member of the LGBTQ plus community. Today, we will be hearing about his experience as a student in the K-12 educational system and how that has impacted him in higher education, and how that can bring awareness to us educators in the classroom about your students and those students who are members of the LGBTQ plus community. So thank you for being with us today, Theo.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get started with some questions that can hopefully help many educators in the future. So here's the first one. As an LGBTQ plus individual, can you share a bit about your own experience navigating school as a student? And how did your identity shape your experience in the education system?
Yeah, I think I would like to start out with saying that I'm not from the Central Valley. I know a lot of my peers have a very different story than I do, and I'm very privileged for the story I do have. I'm from Santa Clara County, so a county that's a little bit more progressive.
Mm-hmm.
I can say throughout my K through 12 system, I've had nothing but support from my teachers, which I would say helped me thrive academically. I was always on honor roll.
Yeah.
It just like not having that additional stressor to me or to have.
Okay.
And I know for me, like I'm a first gen Mexican. I come from a first gen Mexican household.
Okay.
So my parents weren't fully supportive at first. They come around, but it's hard. It's really hard for parents. So like having those teachers be like my trusted adult, I could go to them, talk to them. I stayed in their classrooms during lunchtime, and just like knowing that at the end of the day they respected me and they could support me.
So they give you that sense of security in the classroom and support and what you needed, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So but you are studying here in the Central Valley higher ed. Awesome. Good to hear. Could you share like some examples where you've witnessed a particular support strategy, whether it was for you or for someone else in the community, that made a difference in the classroom or in school in general?
I think my biggest one was because I know a lot of students can't change their name legally.
Yes.
So, and everyone has a roster, of course. So instead of the teacher reading the name off the roster, they gave everyone like the little like paper so they can make a tent with their preferred name, but kind of explaining it like, oh, if you have a nickname or if you go by any other name, because when you say preferred name, I know that's very intimidating to some people because they're like, what? I don't have a preferred name. It's like, okay, then a nickname. And then you're like putting your pronouns on the bottom. And then like kind of behind like the little tent is kind of like a little story about your name and a little bit about you.
Oh, that's beautiful. So that did that like bring you security? Did it make you safe? Did a lot of the kids how did you see yourself and your classmates kind of react to that?
I believe it had such a important impact. Like, it was very, I want to say beautiful, kind of, because I feel like unintentionally when you read names off a roster, and especially if you have like a trans student and who didn't change their name, sometimes it's intimidating to stand up and be like, hey, I don't go by this name.
Of course.
So just having like such an easy flow of being like, this is actually what I go by, and the teacher being like, okay, yeah. Like, it's not a big deal. It's just another day.
So it kind of gives the sense of, I see you, but I'm not going to make a show of, something that is so important and so special to you. Awesome. What challenges have you noticed when a teacher or even students in the K-12 system try to create more inclusive environments for LGBTQ plus students?
So this story isn't particularly about me, but it was about my site supervisor. I interned at a local LGBT organization, and they table at K through 12 schools. And they recently tabled, I say recently, it happened a year ago. They tabled at a middle school out in the Central Valley. And because I think it was just like a community like resource fair. And they're tabling, and a student got really aggressive towards their table to the point that like they had to bring out like the security guard, and they had to tell my supervisor to leave because just of the child's reaction. It's nearby too.
And it's nearby, and so, as adults, right, you kind of have to like step back and say, okay, this is child. How do you overcome some of those, challenges?
Yeah, because I could imagine like some of the kids told me, because I helped with their youth programming, about the incident
At that school. Okay.
And the GSA, because I know that school had a GSA as well.
So the Gay Straight Alliance Club, or
I think it's Gender Sexuality Alliance now.
Okay, perfect.
And I think that the teachers that were allies just kind of made it more prominent that they were allies, like in like small ways, like having like little posters or like
in classrooms.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just kind of like trying to like affirm those students. I wish they did more, maybe like assembly being like, hey, not even making it about LGBT, but being like, these actions aren't acceptable, just to like make sure like students feel safe on that campus.
Okay. Thank you. So LGBTQ plus students benefit from seeing themselves reflected in the curriculum. How do you think schools can do a better job of integrating LGBTQ plus representation into what is taught?
This question, I was thinking a lot about this question, because I was like, how can you integrate like LGBT figures in like classes like math, where you're like, how do you even fit that?
Yeah.
And I was thinking maybe like having a day where you talk about like careers and like prominent figures within the field, like especially like mathematics. You talk about like all these different mathematicians, but also like put in some LGBT figures, or put like figures around your room and kind of have like a QR code about like their story.
Oh,
And they don't necessarily have to be purely LGBT, but just like sprinkling them in there once in a while. And I feel like it's easier for history and English because, like, of course, you can
languages. Yeah.
because you could integrate like queer like speakers or like books.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say just like discussing these figures.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. It's really good insight to hear from a community member, and seeing how even I can apply that in my classroom. Awesome. So many schools still struggle with providing comprehensive LGBTQ plus training for educators, whether it be for students, whether it be for, colleagues, whatever it may be. From your perspective, not only as a student, right, but as a professional, how important is professional development on LGBTQ plus issues, and what do you think should be included in this training?
Yeah, I think it's really important. It's cultural competency. And I believe the gap of knowledge is so wide that, especially for educators, because educators can range from like the ages of like 20, 22 or up.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of stuff that happens is because of just a lack of knowledge. So I believe these trainings are necessary, and some things that need to be addressed in like trainings is like gender neutral language. I feel like it should be. I see a new uprising like gender neutral languages or gender neutral language, but I just feel like it's so important to like not use like ma'am or sir, because I know like some teachers still use that, but like as I said, like gender non-conforming people or trans individuals, they're not going to outrightly speak out against you, especially if you're their teacher and someone they have to look up to. They're going to be like, okay, I'm just going to accept this, and this is no longer like a safe space for me. And just like the typical like pronoun training, because I know for some people they don't understand the importance of pronouns or like even addressing their own pronouns, because they're like, well, you can look at me and like tell what I am. But like just seeing like you address your pronouns makes a world difference. I remember when I first came to college, that's the first thing I noticed was when I started my first biology class. When the teacher was showing their syllabus, they had their pronouns, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm like, that's so cool. I've never seen that before. I'm like, okay, I think this is a teacher like I can approach now. Like I feel safer in this class.
Okay, awesome. And so, what would you say to people that are like, or educators, professionals, or even parents that say, hey, I don't want to take part in this, right? Because there's always pushback, right? What if a teacher says, hey, like, I do want to take this training. I do want to implement these things in my classroom, but there's pushback. What kind of tips or what kind of words do you have for teachers who do want to, make their colleagues or their students feel safe in this environment, but they're getting pushed back? It's a heavy question.
I know, that's why I'm like thinking about it.
It's okay.
Because at the end of the day, it is a partnership. But these children look up so much to their teachers. Like I know a lot of the GSA advisors in the Central Valley who get a lot of pushback because they run basically a gay club in like most people's eyes. And like just kind of like standing your ground, getting support from fellow teachers, your administration, talking with your principal. Because like I said, like back when I went through the K through 12 system, I didn't have support at home. So my only support system was my teachers. So just like showing that like you're making an effort and showing these students that you do care about them means like the world to them.
It's beautiful. And going back to you mentioning those name tents, right? Other than those name tents, what small steps can educators take to start making their classrooms more inclusive, even if their schools don't have formal policies in place, or even if it is mentioned not to mention, right, outright any political allyship?
I would say like kind of like I said, like having like prominent like figures like within your field on your walls, or maybe like adding some like literature to your room, because I know like a lot of classrooms have like little like books in their like corner. So adding some like queer books, but also like doing small details to your classroom, like having like a "You're safe with me" pin. It doesn't necessarily have to be like outwardly like rainbow or anything. Just being like "You're safe with me" kind of like gives off that message. Like if you can have a little flag somewhere, but I know that's difficult to even do. Or having like also like a "You belong" poster in your classroom somewhere.
Okay, awesome. So, how can our listeners, whether they are in the classroom or supporting from the outside, become stronger allies for LGBTQ plus students in the K through 12 system?
Of course. You could always join like a local training. I know a lot of like LGBT nonprofits always have training online. Additionally, check to see if your school has a GSA and talk to the advisor and be like, how can I support you guys in any way, and like build that connection and kind of get your name out there. Additionally, there's a lot of like LGBT nonprofits that also have a youth sector. So kind of like popping in your head that way and like asking them what they need, just so you know, like if a student does come out to you, you have resources to hand them out, so you're not completely like a fish out of water, essentially.
Awesome. Well, Theo, I just want to thank you for joining us today and truly sharing your experience and your wisdom, not only with me, but, our listeners here who are educators in the classroom and having these daily interactions with these students. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your intel. And so very appreciative of you.
Thank you for this opportunity.
No, of course. Awesome. So, as we wrap up today's episodes, I want to highlight that supporting LGBTQ plus students isn't just the responsibility of schools. It's something that involves the entire community. And you, as an educator, taking these small steps and showing these small supports, you're advocating for, this amazing opportunity for these students. So educators, you can advocate for inclusive policies and practices in your schools. Parent and community members, you can push for comprehensive anti-bullying policies that protect LGBTQ plus students. And if your students speak up, whether it's by starting a GSA, educating your peers, or simply standing up for an LGBTQ plus classmate. Research from the Trevor Project shows that just one supportive adult in an LGBTQ plus student's life can reduce the likelihood of an attempted suicide by 40%. You have the power to be that person. I truly hope that today's discussion has sparked some sort of idea or, just an incentive for how we can all create more supportive environments for our LGBTQ plus students. And remember that together we can make a difference in the lives of all our students. I appreciate you tuning in and diving into this important conversation. The information shared in this episode was supported by research and reports from several key sources. These sources include the 2021 National School Climate Survey, the 2022 Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance System, the Data Summary and Trends Report, the LGBTQ plus awareness programs and school safety research briefs, impact of gender and sexuality alliances on LGBTQ plus students' well-being from 2023, accelerating acceptance from 2023 as well, LGBTQ plus curriculum and representation study, the report of the 2015 U.S. Transgender Survey from 2016, LGBTQ plus supportive environments and policies, LGBTQ plus professional development and resources. Each of these studies reinforces the importance of creating safe, inclusive, and equitable educational spaces for all students. And as always, for links to these sources and more information, check out our show notes, right? Or the description. And as always, thank you for listening. Remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and I hope to see you next time.